Hello everyone, we are back with the day 2 of Agency Advantage 2.0 and we had a great day. One, we had Khushbu Doshi, we had Brent Weaver, Jason Swank and the list of other guest speakers. And we are back with the day 2 and we have a lineup of multiple guest speakers for you and it is your chance to survive and scale in the age of AI. So it is your chance to learn how you can scale your agency. So, without further ado, before starting the session, I would like to give a shout out to our proud partners. Uh, we also have booth setup. We have Cookiyas, Valos, and there are others. So feel free to visit the booths as well. And I would like to see some reactions on the screen if I can see some reactions so we can start with the keynote session. So, let me also check the chat option from where you all are tuning in. If you can share the country or the city where you all are tuning in, so I can see some comments. Uh, yeah, definitely, Usama. Good evening as well for those who are in the Asian region. So, the first speaker we have is Marcel Petitpas. So I requested him to be a keynote speaker of this event. Without a further ado, we can start the event with a keynote session. Then we have a session with Chris. So I think we can start the session. So you have a lot to learn today as well. And if you are a Cloudways customer, so we have a session with Cloudways team as well, where we will discuss about how and what we are building for the agencies. So stay tuned for that session. And at the end of the event, we will announce the winners as well. So if you are here to participate in the activities, so feel free to participate. Feel free to learn. Feel free to fun with the activities, and we will announce the winner for the activities and for the leaderboard at the end of the event. So without further ado, we can start the keynote session. We have Marcel Petitpas for the keynote session on AI versus agencies, who wins.
Hey, it's Marcel here from Pariko, and I want to thank everyone at the Agency Advantage for having me here and for putting on this incredible event. And I want to thank you for taking the time out of your very busy day to be here to hear what I have to say. I want to talk today about a conversation that is on a lot of people's minds, not only in the agency world, but also in the software world, which is who's going to win this emerging battle between agencies and software. I want to share my perspective as somebody who lives in both of these worlds, that's actively incubating a dozen AI companies inside of a venture studio and spent 6 years coaching software companies on growth, as well as has spent the last 8 years running a technology-enabled service companies that has served hundreds of agencies around the world and helped them with profitability. I want to put those two perspectives together and help you understand how I see these worlds colliding, the unique advantage that agencies have to win in this market, and why this should be an exciting moment for you as opposed to a moment that might be very scary. Let's talk about the problem I'm hearing from agency owners. Number one is there is a ton of margin pressure right now, ramping up over several years. It started in COVID when we had the globalization of talent and onshore talent rapidly increased. And now we have AI that's commoditizing a lot of the things that we used to compete on. And so the second thing is competitive moats are changing. The things that we used to be able to compete on, the things that used to feel defensible, like our geography or the type of skill sets that we had or our ability to acquire great talent, a lot of these things are just eroding, and ultimately it becomes unclear what to do next. When it feels like SaaS is going to be eating our lunch, when it feels like clients are less and less willing to pay for the things that they used to be willing to pay for, when it feels like a lot of the stuff that we've made our bread and butter on is one prompt away in Claude from being 60, 70, 80% as good as it would have been if we banged it out, what do we do? Where do we go from here as an industry? I want to share in this presentation a couple of important things. I want to talk about how value is created, so you have something to anchor yourself to as you're making decisions about where to take your business. Talk about your competitive advantages as an agency. When we think about competing against a SaaS company, what do you have that they don't have? Why are you actually in a better position to win right now? And this is part of the reason that more venture capital and private equity money is flowing into services than ever before. And the reason that Sequoia, one of the largest venture capital funds on the planet, believes that the next trillion-dollar company is actually going to be a tech-enabled service company. And it's part of the reason that they're funding tech-enabled services, why Combinator has an entire services cohort that they're focused on, people taking traditional services and levering them up with tech. And there's more funding going into acquiring traditional service businesses and levering them up with tech than ever before. And so if you can think through this in the right way, you have more opportunity as a service-based business than you have ever had before. And I want to talk today about how to build value and compete into the future. I run a company called Pariko. We spent the last 8 years building a tech-enabled service company that helps agencies take care of the money side of their business. You can think of us like the perfect combination of a fractional CFO and a fractional COO with the power to bring data from both sides of the business together to tell a complete story about how you're performing, why you're performing that way, and what to do about it. We combine consulting expertise with technology at a price point that was never available prior. We'll talk about why that makes sense and the framework that we use to think through how to invest in technology, how to build our business model. Importantly, for the context of this conversation, I'm also one of the portfolio growth leaders at Martell Ventures, where we've incubated over a dozen AI companies in the last 18 months. And I'm on the front lines of SaaS. Prior to joining Martell Ventures, I was part of SaaS Academy, started by Dan Martell. I was the first head strategic coach at SaaS Academy and spent 6 years doing over 1,000 coaching calls with hundreds of SaaS companies, watching that industry evolve and understanding the nuances of software. Now, there's something that you should understand about SaaS and agencies. We have pretended that these were materially different businesses for a long time. But the reality is that SaaS has always had, especially when you go up market to like mid and enterprise B2B SaaS, a ton of human capital. And through financial engineering, we've pretended that that human capital didn't exist. Instead of calling the human capital and the professional services in SaaS companies what it was, we had venture capital subsidizing it, and we would call it stuff like customer success, support, customization, right? But there's a lot of human touch required to get a SaaS customer to what they're ultimately buying, which is an outcome, right? The customer has always been buying the outcome. And we've had this arbitrary distinction between SaaS companies and service companies. And we valued SaaS companies very differently. But the realization, especially in the last couple of years, and as of February 2026, when we had what's being called the SaaS apocalypse, where $285 billion of enterprise value were wiped from the market in a couple of days, as all these SaaS companies started getting repriced, is that SaaS wasn't really what we thought it was. And ultimately, agencies and SaaS are very similar, and they're increasingly converging on one thing, which is the outcome, which is the only thing the customer has ever bought. And this distinction is largely going away. And this is the important thing to pay attention to as an agency. And so in SaaS, the erosion is, or seat-based pricing. The conversations that we've been having over the last decade around hourly-based pricing, that's the conversation happening in SaaS around seat-based pricing right now. And people are saying that by 2028, this will be extinct as a pricing model. Everyone is moving towards outcome-based pricing. For agencies, this is time and materials. We've been talking about this for a really long time. Everyone is saying, hey, the labor arbitrage model is really kind of going away, and what we need to focus on is selling outcomes. And so what this ultimately means is SaaS and agencies have always competed with each other, but that competition is becoming a lot more obvious, and it's converging. And it's converging on the thing that's always been important, which is the value equation. This was borrowed from Alex Hormozi. Many of you have probably seen this before, but if we think about how value is created, I think that this formula is a really good mental model for how to think about it. It's about understanding the dream outcome that the client has, solving a problem or getting an outcome in their business. They're usually not achieving an outcome in their business because there's a problem holding them back, multiplied by their perceived likelihood of achievement. So how likely do they believe they are to get this outcome working with you? And on the bottom side of this equation, you have the time delay. So how long will it take to accomplish this outcome, multiplied by their sacrifice and effort as cost. There are two sides of this equation that you can solve for in order to create value, which is what every customer is after. They want to get the most value possible. And value is not just a function of how much upside you create. It's a function of that upside relative to the cost and time delay. This becomes important when you think about your position as an agency. For many problem spaces, you can charge a lot more money than a SaaS company because you have a higher perceived likelihood of getting to the outcome, because you have a proven process, expertise, a track record. Humans tend to believe they're going to be more successful when they have other humans helping them, facilitating the process, doing the work, making sure the steps get done, as opposed to buying software and having to figure this out on their own. For every dollar spent on software, $6 are spent on services. There is a 6 times larger total addressable market for services. Those services are going to become increasingly technology leveraged, but this is the opportunity that you have. You currently own the you currently own the primary competitive moats around that 6 times larger TAM, which is the brand, the trust, the credibility that gives you pricing power and gives you a higher perceived likelihood of accomplishing the outcome. Your opportunity as a service-based business lies in this half of the equation, which is starting to think about how you leverage technology to decrease the amount of time that it takes to deliver an outcome. And this is not in terms of absolute time, but also in terms of the time elapsed. So yes, it's true that you could take a process that used to take 100 hours and decrease that down to 50 hours. Doing that would effectively lower this side of the cost equation. So you could charge less money and still have great margins. But importantly, what you'd want to do is take that from a 3-week process down to a 1-week process. And that would triple the value of the product from a time delay perspective, getting the outcome to the client quicker. That is where your opportunity lies as a service-based business and where technology needs to increase. And on the flip side, SaaS companies are competing from the other side. They are building software and are able to win on this side of the equation. But a lot of their challenge is up here. How do they compensate for that? They throw human capital at it. You look at big ERP deployments, CRM deployments, maybe some of you bought a project management solution recently, and the time delay tends to still be significant. Months to procure and implement and train your team on this thing. And oftentimes you're either working with humans on that software company's team to implement this, you might be paying for that implementation, or you're working with an implementation partner, or you're incurring a lot of sacrifice and effort internally to get to that outcome. Software alone does not solve for this. And where the software companies have to compensate with human capital and compete with you on a service basis is around increasing the perceived likelihood that the client is going to get to the outcome. Because we know that oftentimes selling them software is not enough. So functionally, how do you think about this? And the thing that's really funny about this is that if you talk to most product managers at software companies, this is the person that's responsible for defining what are we going to build and how are we going to build it. If you were to ask them, hey, given unlimited time and resources, how would you actually run your product management process? Most of the product managers that you speak to would describe something that sounds a lot like consulting. They would say things like, oh, we would be close to our customer. We would work alongside them. We would be in their office, watching them work, building small iterative solutions and testing them with the customer in real time and getting in the weeds and solving the problem hands-on with the customer so we can deeply understand what the problem is, how it gets solved, how the customer solves it today, what a great product needs to do and how it needs to work to deliver value to the customer. And the crazy thing is, as a service-based business, you are being paid. You're literally building an entire business to do what I would consider to be the best practices for building amazing product. So here's the mindset shift around this and how you can actually start to think about this tactically. How do you start to innovate on the value equation so that you can win and compete into the future? Most people have heard of an MVP, and they think about this as being a minimum viable product. In startup land, this is often thought of as one of the first steps to building a company. What is the minimum viable product? What's the simplest, cheapest, fastest thing that we can build to sell to a customer and start to get feedback? And I think this is a misunderstanding and 3 steps removed from where you actually should start. The first MVP is the minimum viable problem. You can't build a product unless you know what problem you're solving. You can't create value unless you know what the dream outcome is for the client. A lot of SaaS companies fail to get clear on the minimum viable problem. A lot of agencies often get lost in this over the years as they take on a lot of different stuff. Number 2 is having a minimum viable point of view on that problem. The point of view is really a compelling understanding of why this problem exists. If it's a new problem, why has it begun to exist? If it's an old problem, why is it still unsolved? Or why do the solutions that used to work not work anymore in a changing world? What needs to be true about the future solution to be effective in that changing world? You have to get really clear, and that narrative should be compelling. It should resonate with people and it should draw them to you. This becomes the opinion that is a defensible layer in how you approach step 3, which is ultimately the biggest moat, the minimum viable process. This is the precursor to product because product is the leveraging of a process. Do you have a set of steps that regardless of the technology being used, if those steps are followed in sequence, they repeatably produce the outcome or solve the problem being sold to the customer? And until you have this, there is no point in building product. Building product will hold the company back. It will be more expensive and slower and more time consuming and more difficult to iterate on and more difficult to understand what's wrong. And in my experience, one of the best minimum viable products for most SaaS companies looks a lot like an agency. It's literally just getting in there and doing the consulting work, that teaches you all of the nuances, all of the edge cases, all of the ways in which you need to handle a specific problem in order to get an outcome consistently. And then product is simply a question of using tools and processes and technology and automation and software and AI. There's many different mediums for this to start solving for these different sides of the equation, either delivering more value, solving larger problems, increasing the likelihood and consistency with which you can solve that problem, making it more reliable, making it faster, making it more scalable, or decreasing the amount of cost, effort, sacrifice, friction between the customer and the outcome. That is literally what building product is about. Taking a process that solves a problem repeatably and doing it better, faster, more consistently at higher volumes. Compared to most SaaS companies, you have an advantage here. And this is the hardest part. When you skip over this, you move slower. When you build product without having this figured out, you move slower. The cost of building product is going down all the time. For a lot of you, you don't need to build fancy software. You can build a few AI automations using Claude Code, using off-the-shelf tools. So ultimately, my message to you is this: you have the advantage here. You've already done the hardest work, and you just have more tools now and a lower cost to leverage that process to solve for these other parts of the value equation and create more value and compete. You are positioned much better than most of the AI startups that don't have this subject matter expertise and are rushing to build product that isn't following a process that's going to lead to the right outcome. Don't sleep on this opportunity, and don't sleep on things like Claude Code. Don't sleep on bringing in some low-cost resources to take a look at your process and figure out how you can create much more value with some small investments. I'm a non-technical person. I've built and deployed production software talking to Claude Code. If I can do it, you can do it too. I want to encourage you all to check out the Pariko toolkit, because ultimately, at the end of the day, none of this matters unless you are able to maintain strong margins. There's additional tools inside the toolkit that can help you think through not only what I've discussed today, but doing that profitably moving forward. And of course, if you are tired of worrying about the money side of your business, check us out. We'd love to help you. And with that, I want to thank everyone for being here. I hope that this was helpful. And thank you to everyone at the Agency Advantage event for putting this on and for adding value to our industry. Thank you for your time, and Godspeed.
So that was Marcel Petitpas, and I hope you enjoyed the session, the keynote session by Marcel from Pariko Agency. The next we have Chris Dubois from the agency, Dynamic Agency US. We will be right back. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back in a minute, and then we can start the next session of the day 2.